With the absence of Dutch, does the setting of the urban jungle and the performance by Danny Glover make Predator 2 worth a watch? Let's find out. Before we get started, I am Carter Scotland Allen. For those of you that don't know, this is my film channel. I will talk anything and everything that interests me film-wise, so please be sure to like and subscribe if you are interested in any film content. But today we are talking Predator 2. Let me know your favorite kill in Predator 2 down in the comments below. Predator 2 came out in 1990, just 3 years after the original film, but taking place 7 years in the future in 1997 in the city of Los Angeles, California. I will have to say, right off the bat, I absolutely love that they completely switched things up from the original, and even though that the film takes some weird turns and it doesn't overall stick the landing, I do think it is a fun watch and brings a ton of value to the Predator franchise simply for being so different. The Predator returns to Earth, this time to stake a claim on the war-torn streets of a dystopian Los Angeles. Okay, moving on to the directing for the film, we are starting with Stephen Hopkins, the director who had to follow up John McTiernan, the great director known for Die Hard, Predator. He's one of the great action classic directors, but Stephen Hopkins had to follow him up, and I do think he did a good job. Hopkins manages to bring a completely different take to the Predator that completely adds a whole new perspective to the Predator style, the Predator lore, the way that the Predator works within our world, and seeing the Predator work in cities compared to what we know in the jungle. Obviously, this is only the second film that we've seen the Predator, but again, it was such a jarring difference compared to that original film that it does make for such a generally entertaining watch. The story is absolutely bonkers, but the reason that this film works, even on today's standards, is the fact that it adds some really cool lore to the Predator overall, and manages to have some of the coolest moments in Predator history. Although some things in the film may be odd writing-wise, and just acting-wise in general, I do think Stephen Hopkins managed to bring a fun, unique take to the Predator, while adding something new, and generally making a good sequel, which we don't get in general very often. Sequels are hard to make, but Predator 2 is a fun and might generally be the best Predator sequel, but we will have to find out after taking a look at Predators, The Predator, and soon to come out on Hulu, Prey. Moving on to our cast and our characters. So we have Danny Glover as our main star, and we have Gary Busey as kind of our co-star lead, who's the federal agent kind of antagonist character, but we also have Bill Paxton, who's fantastic as our comedic style role buddy cop with Danny Glover. This film generally has a fun buddy romance to it, but I will say it is a little bit forgettable, and all of the other characters aside from Danny Glover's character Mike Harrigan all kind of fade the further away you get from watching this film. And of course, the only returning character is the Predator itself. Obviously, not the exact same Predator from the original film, but the Predator of, the same species. It is a Predator. There are different Predators to be seen later on in this film. There's like 3 or 4 of them. I do think that sequence is really cool, but we'll talk about that later on. But as for the Predator, it's really cool seeing, a kind of updated design, as well as seeing a whole new arsenal for this badass creature. And moving right along to the story. As I mentioned before, this film deals with a very bonkers story following a gang of voodoo drug lords in LA that are somehow managing to take over all of the West Coast. I don't know how that's possible, but it's insane. It's a really wild theory, crazy idea, script. I don't get how it even managed to make the screen, but it's fun. It is really fun, and I could imagine being a kid having a blast with this film. I do genuinely wish that I watched this film as a kid, because I grew up loving Predator, and I think I would have had a blast with this film. I don't think I would have loved it, but I think I would have actually had maybe a little bit more nostalgia for it. Like I would have enjoyed it more now because I would have had that nostalgia for it. So I do wish I would have watched Predator 2 more growing up. I've only seen it 2 times now, but I do think it is a fun watch. Again, as the story, we have the cops following the voodoo drug lords, all while being hunted down by the Predator. This storyline would never happen today, although I am very glad it exists. It is very different, very jarring from that original film, could very well be a completely different film, and this could have been Predator 1, and then the the original film with Dutch and Arnold could have been the sequel, and people would have never known. Like, you could have taken out the little references to the original film that are in this, and you would have never known. Like, it's just, they're both so different, and that's what I do appreciate about this film. While the story is crazy and doesn't even come close to the original, even though the original film is super simple in story overall, this film manages to be an overall engaging experience simply because of the added exploration to the Predator lore. Adding on to this film might have one of my most favorite moments in Predator history when Mike Harrigan is gifted the flintlock pistol from 1715 that he kind of won from defeating a Predator, kind of becoming a Predator himself. And I think that gun that was given to him will be appearing in Prey. We will see. Prey takes place in 1719. The gun was branded with 1715, so who knows? I'm assuming they will at least mention it. How could they not? I think it is a missed opportunity if they don't. But let's move back to Predator 2. But I just hope they do that, because then it would perfectly sync Prey with Predator 2 in the most unique and wild way. Now moving on to the cinematography, the visuals. Overall, the visuals in the film aren't necessarily fantastic. There's nothing that I have a gripe about. There's nothing that I have complaints about. It is just, it's a 90s film, an early 90s, basically feels like an 80s film, but yeah, it's a 90s film, action film. It's fine. It's fun. It's fun to look at, although it's not necessarily as fun to look at compared to the first one, in my opinion. I do think there are some great shots. We have one shot of the alleyway with the water reflection and the Predator walking as the camouflage is kind of messed up by the water. I think that shot's fantastic, as well as the super iconic shot of the Predator standing on top of a building with a spine in one hand and a spear in the other hand. That shot's fantastic. Overall, though, there's nothing too amazing or too memorable to me. I do think the final sequence with the like thermal suits and the lasers on the guns, I think that works, but it's a little bit forgettable after a while. I think, me being a Predator fan and a huge Predator fan that I am, I will remember that sequence. But again, if you're really only attached to that first film, overall this film might be a little bit forgettable on the visual side. Nothing to gripe about, just nothing too visually entertaining in the long run. Now moving on to the score. Overall, I will have to say the score is the component that worked the least for me. It's not that it was a bad score, it's just that a score that I didn't remember. I just didn't really remember it until I had to keep playing it back on YouTube, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess I do remember that being played in the film, which I guess could be seen as a good thing and a bad thing. It really meshed with the film because I didn't necessarily notice it. And I might be crazy for having this thought because it is done by the great Alan Silvestri, who did the original film. But again, I just don't think it matches the original film as far as the way that it just absolutely 100% fits, and you just feel that badassness from the original film. This isn't necessarily trying to copy that tone with the score, but I don't think it perfectly 100% meshes. Okay, and moving on to the final thoughts. Overall, Predator 2 is a really fun sequel that has extremely fun kills, a very fun exploration of the Predator lore, and the awesome introduction of the Xenomorph. I forgot to say this in the Predator 1, the Predator 1987 review, but that is a film that I would absolutely own, and I do own all 4 of the Predator films, other than Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem, but I do own all 4 of the films, and I would say if you're a fan of the first film, but only the first film, and you're really just not too attached to these, then stick with that first film. Only keep that first film. But I personally found all 4 of these films for a collection of like $10-15 on Blu-ray. I said screw it because I genuinely enjoy 3 out of the 4 Predator films, and we will talk more about that in those separate Predator reviews. But as for this film, if you are a fan of the original film and haven't seen this film, I would say give this film a try. It's a very fun sequel, and I don't think it necessarily lives up to the original, but it is a good addition to the franchise and is definitely worth existing. Okay, so now we have done 2 out of these 6 films featuring the character, the creature of the Predator. Next up on the review list, we have Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem. I'm not necessarily too excited to talk about those films, so yeah, those reviews might be a little bit shorter because I don't have too much to say about them. But we have those film reviews coming out, as well as the review for Predators and the Predator, leading up to Prey. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Carter Scotland Allen. Be sure to check out my Predator giveaway video, which should be out either now or in a couple days, maybe tomorrow, not for sure. But please be sure to stay tuned for that because I'm very excited for that Predator giveaway leading up to the release of Prey. I'm Carter Scotland Allen, and I will see you guys in my next video. Peace.